Hello and welcome to the garden. Today's video is all about chicory, and in particular I want to take a look at the witloof chicory here and see whether I've produced any useful roots. So the chicory, very closely related to endive. They're from the same genus, and the endive and chicory, they all have in common that bitter quality to the leaf. And in order to get some decent palatable stuff from this witloof chicory, I want to blanch it. I'm also going to force it. Now, sometimes when you hear about forcing and blanching, those words are kind of used interchangeably, because very often when you're blanching you're also forcing, but they are actually two completely different things. So forcing is all about bringing a crop forwards, getting a harvest slightly out of time. It's something that used to be done a lot with fruit. So fruit trees or bushes would be moved from outdoors into heated glass houses, and that would bring on their growth earlier in the year and give you an early crop. It's also done with rhubarb. Sometimes you're just blanching the rhubarb, but also if you bring crowns into a heated environment or a warmer environment, then they can be brought into growth earlier in the year than they would ordinarily do. And so that forcing is all about bringing on a crop for an early harvest. The blanching is all to do with excluding light. For the endive and chicory, when you exclude the light, you reduce that bitter element. The leaves become sweeter and a lot more palatable. There's plenty of varieties where the unblanched leaves are really quite foul, but the hearts, when they've been blanched for a couple of weeks, become quite delicious. Perhaps the most commonly encountered from the endive and chicory is the frisee type. It's often put in with mixed salad bags, things like that. Slightly bitter, but these pale yellow hearts of the frisee, they are quite delicious. And I did have some of that here in the garden earlier. It's all gone now. But with those plants, some of them naturally blanch, so the outer leaves will tend to keep the light away from the center, and those, you can cut the outside away and the center will be pale, sort of yellowish green, without having to do any work. But other times you will have to maybe tie them up so that you fold the outer leaves around the heart, tie it, or put a rubber band around it to keep them in place, keep the light off for a couple of weeks to blanch the center. Or you can put a pot over them, that sort of thing. And then there are others where you don't have to do anything. So radicchio, for example, it's quite similar in a lot of ways to the witloof chicory, but the outer leaves will surround the heart and they will exclude the light, and the center of the radicchio is a lot more palatable than the outer leaves. You don't have to do anything with that. So in the garden now, I no longer have any endive, but I do have 3 sorts of chicory. So here I've got what is called sugarloaf chicory. So named because this is a lot less bitter than other sorts. I mean, if I take one of these outer leaves and have a little munch, oh no, that is really quite bitter, very unpleasant to eat, and I don't think there's any sort of preparation you could apply to this leaf to make this palatable. So with the sugarloaf chicory, it's only the very heart that is any good, but these leaves are wrapping this heart quite nicely, and later on, I hope, I don't think it's quite ready yet, I can take this heart out, and that should be a lot nicer. I've made various sowings of radicchio. This is Treviso, and there are different sorts. They have different shaped heads, and there are different colours too, sort of variegated forms. And this is a classic with its crimson leaves and white ribs. Now this one doesn't have much of that colour yet. They develop that colour as they mature, and with the colder weather you then get this classic colour develop. Now with these, again, it's the hearts that you want, and these leaves really do wrap the hearts very nicely, so they exclude the light and you get a very nice heart from these. It's still a little bit bitter, but the bitterness here is quite pleasant. It's not at all foul like that leaf I've just tasted. But you can see that I've got a little bit of decay on the edges of these leaves, and they really are very prone to that. So with these plants in here, I have stripped most of the outer leaves away, trying to avoid this sort of decay, and it looks like I need to remove a few more from here. So I think I'll do that right now. Just pull those leaves away and just leave that heart at the moment. Some of the plants are better looking than others. This one here looks fine. There's no signs of decay there. This one, on the other hand, well, if I peel a few of those away, you can see there's some grotty leaves in there, and I want to get rid of all of that because I really don't want to lose these hearts. So, and there's a slug there enjoying the bitter leaf. They don't tend to get a lot of slug damage. Maybe the slugs don't normally like it too bitter either, but that's now a lot better. But I've got to wait for that heart to finish developing in there. I think one or two of these are close to being ready to harvest, and the others, I need a few more leaves in the heart before they are ready. You can just feel them. You can just feel whether they're firm. This one is not far away actually, but they're going to be great. When you take the outer couple of leaves away, the inside is lovely. So the interesting thing with the chicories is that they form a taproot, and like many plants, they put on that taproot this year. They naturally then overwinter, and then that stored energy fuels their growth in the spring, and they will then go on to flower. Exactly the same as a carrot. So that taproot is quite handy for us, because whether with the radicchio or with the witloof chicory, you can cut the top growth off, and from that stored energy in the root, it will produce new growth. It's a little less common with the radicchio. The witloof chicory, that's what it's intended for. So you grow that not for its top growth initially, but for the root, and then you can harvest those roots, pot them up, and then both force and blanch them at the same time to produce those wonderful, tightly packed young buds, these chicons, and they are absolutely delicious. You can have those in the salad, or they're wonderful braised or cooked in various ways. And that's what I want to get from these roots. I don't have that many. I think I've got 12 here, and I think next year I'd quite like to have a full bed of the witloof chicory, because it is a wonderful thing to have. And today is quite exciting because I'm going to lift these roots and see whether they're going to be any good for forcing. I'm a little bit nervous because I started these in pots, and it's well known that you shouldn't start crops like carrots and parsnips in pots, because they don't transplant, and that's because you want that taproot to go straight down unhindered into the soil, and it's no good if it starts to grow and gets to the bottom of the pot and is then compromised. It's also true of the chicory here, but because I'm not that fussed about the roots themselves, they don't need to be pretty or anything like that. It's not quite as fussy as a carrot or a parsnip. I started these in pots, and if I planted them out early enough, that taproot won't be compromised. If I was a bit late, and I'm often a little bit late planting out, that taproot might be in a poor state. So I'm a little bit nervous to dig these up and see what has happened. So these monstrous plants here, you can see they're rather related to the dandelion from the shape of the leaf. Again, these leaves, even from the middle, oh dear, they are shockingly bitter. I mean, that's really very unpleasant. But what I want to produce from these is something entirely different. So let me see whether I've got anything worth forcing. I'm quite hopeful because they've put on, or at least most of them have put on, a lot of growth. There's quite a lot of top growth on this one, so get the fork in and I'll try and be a little bit careful, see if I can ease the root out. Oh, well, that's not too eager to come out, so that's a good sign. Oh, right, there it goes. Oh. No, I don't have much of a taproot there. Let's have a little look. Well, that's a complete mess. So, yeah, what a mess. So ideally what you'd find now is something resembling a parsnip, and you need a reasonable size root, maybe an inch or more in diameter up the top, and that will be fit for forcing. I don't know what's happened here. I've got a lot of root, and this is massive up the top, but it's forked and it's gone all over the place, and it may be that the soil was, perhaps that was a little bit too rich. I don't know, or maybe the taproot wasn't in a good state when I planted it. Nonetheless, there is plenty of actual bulk to the root here, and that should, with a bit of luck, have stored plenty of goodness for forcing. This is not ideal, it's not what I want to see, but that's what I've got. Now, in order to prepare these, I've got to remove all of this top growth. You don't want to cut too close to the top of the root. You want to leave a good inch or so above the root, because that's where the growing point is. You don't want to remove that, and that's where the new growth is going to come from. These outer leaves can all be stripped away. I mean, this is solid root here, so I don't know. It's very vigorous, and I'm kind of hopeful that this will still force okay, but it isn't pretty, that's for sure. This is not a textbook example of what to get for forcing. I've cut that quite a reasonable distance above the top of the root there, and I don't know if it'll show on the camera, but you can see this yellow in the center here where the light's been excluded, and that's what we're going to get when we force these, and that's going to be quite delicious with a bit of luck. All of this is for the compost. I'll lift some more now and we'll see whether there are some better looking specimens, because that is quite an ugly monster. So I must confess to being rather disappointed with the results. I don't have a single decent root, not what I would think of as a single decent root here. They are all ugly, gnarly specimens. Most of them are a good size though. One or two are a bit on the small side. This is not what I was hoping for. Undoubtedly my fault. I suspect the soil may have been a little rich here. That tends to be thought of as encouraging forking of roots. I probably left these in the pots a little bit too long and the taproot was compromised, and that's why I have this rather scruffy root here. I can't complain about the growth. They've been vigorous and healthy. The top growth on these was fantastic. And I mean, this is a big old chicory plant here. I'm still going to have a go at forcing these, and I mean, I don't need the root to be pretty. I would think there was enough root volume in this ugly mess to do the job. So all that's really for is a store of food from which the chicon will grow. I've cut these with plenty of growth here, so the bud is still right in there in the center, and all I need to do now is pot these up. Ideally they would appreciate a period of cold, a few weeks, and then I can bring them indoors, not too warm, somewhere around 15 degrees would be ideal, I would guess, and just keep them just damp, and hopefully in the dark somewhere these chicons will develop. I think I'm going to put them in our understairs cupboard. It won't be too warm in there, but it will be completely dark. So I'll pot these up and get some ready to go. Well, they might not be quite what I was hoping for, but I'm going to carry on regardless. Now, I'm going to put 4 roots, I think, into one of these large pots. This is a 10-litre pot. Doesn't really matter what you use. If you've got lots of roots, you can pack them into a basket or anything. And I'm just going to pack them in with some old potting soil. I'm using something that I grew carrots in earlier in the year, so it's very sandy, a light soil. You're not looking for a rich soil to provide goodness. The plant is going to get the goodness from the root. So it's just a medium that you can pack the roots into, and it's going to help give the roots some moisture. That's all. So any sort of fairly bland potting mix should be fine. Now, if these roots had grown well, they would be potentially quite long, in which case I would cut them maybe 10-12 inches at the most and pack those in. They could be cut a little bit shorter than that, and you can just pack them in however many you want into a container. The rest you could pack in a tray of sand or something to store them for a while. I think I'm going to do one of these in the pots now, and I will put the other roots in some old soil in one of the sheds here, and they can sit there and wait until I'm ready to pot those up as well. Right, so I've picked out 4 ugly roots. I think they should be okay, even though they're a bit of a mess. So, start with just packing one of those in there. So I've got 2 of the larger ones and 2 of the slightly smaller roots. They're all pretty gnarly and forked, but I think that will be fine. Right, I think that will do. And now I just want to give that a drop of water. This is very dry soil. So that's it for the first stage. This pot is ready to go now. I'm going to put this into one of the sheds out here. It's going to be pretty cold in there for the next couple of weeks. And then I will relocate this indoors. And when I move them indoors, these old roots are going to think spring has arrived. And that's going to encourage them to kick off into new growth. And all being well, we shall get some nice chicons after, I don't know, just they're not that slow, so 2 or 3 weeks I think is probably enough to see some nice new buds there. So I'll return at that point and show you what I've got. Oh, hello, and it's been a few weeks since I filmed the lifting and potting up of the witloof chicory. Now I will show you what's happened to that pot in a moment, but before I do, I thought I would show you what's happened to one of the radicchio. So I'm not forcing this, I'm just blanching it. I cut one of these radicchio heads recently, and I've just put a couple of plant pots over the top to keep the light out. I haven't lifted that root, so growth will be rather slow, and I don't expect to get anything for quite some time, but you can just see the beginnings of new growth. So I've got a couple of pots there. If you just put one on, you need to tape over the holes to keep the light out. You might be able to make out the centre of this radicchio is growing. So it's always a good idea to cut them and leave plenty of growth from the top of the root here, because very often you'll get a second crop from that. So I did think about maybe lifting those roots as well, but I think I'm not going to bother. I'll just chuck a couple of flower pots on there and wait a few weeks until it's given me some new growth. It all depends, of course, whether those original plants have grown well and what sort of state they're in, but that one is absolutely fine. So I'm sure I'm going to get a crop off of that. And I shall do the same with the rest of the heads in there as I take them through the winter. So here's the pot that I prepared, well, a few weeks ago now, but if you're watching this video, of course, a few minutes ago. This had 2 fairly large roots and 2 of the smaller roots. No prizes for guessing which are which. So this stayed in the shed outdoors for a while, and it got a nice chill there. And then when I brought it indoors, I've moved this into our understairs cupboard, and I've kept the soil in there just moist, not sopping wet or anything. And it's been warm and dark, and it's grown away quite well. Slightly mixed results, but of course then these roots were quite different. So the 2 at the front here, these have formed really quite nice, tight, compact chicons, and I mean they look as they should do. And this one in particular is very fine, and they need, I would guess, another week, maybe week and a half, and then they're ready. I mean, these grow pretty quick in the dark and the warmth. They only take a few weeks, but I think these 2 I'll leave for another week or so. Excuse me. These 2 at the back, well, these were 2 of the largest roots that I had, and actually they're quite clearly too big, because these heads are a lot more loose, both of them in fact. Whether I get anything firm from the center of those, I don't know, but I would think these would be good. These I'm going to braise whole. It's fairly classic treatment for them. These I might actually strip down and just use the individual leaves. They'd be excellent in the salad, but they'll also be very good cooked. If I turn this round, you can see that there's all this odd little growth coming out various points around the crown here, but I do have one good main head, and it may well be that after I've cut this I might get a second head. That would be fairly typical. After these have grown, I will cut them again and see if I get some regrowth. That regrowth does tend to be a bit more open like these, but still it's all good, useful leaf. These look a little bit grubby, so I'm going to give one a quick taste, but I think I might just pop indoors and give that a quick rinse. I think this is where I got a lot of soil on top of the root, which wasn't very smart, but I'll be back in a moment. So just rinse that little bit of old soil away. This looks like a very nice leaf actually. So this is still, of course, a little bit bitter. You won't get rid of that characteristic bitterness, but it's been transformed from something that is really quite foul to something entirely palatable, and with the appropriate preparation, potentially rather delicious. So what I would ideally prefer to get are the tightly packed buds, because I really like them when they are braised. But these larger leaves and the looser stuff, that would be great with a fairly simple vinaigrette and a few other odds and ends to make a very pleasant winter salad. But these leaves are actually pretty good now. So given the state of the roots I started with, I'm pretty happy with that result. I think next season I've put aside a bed for these roots, and I'll probably not put anything in that bed except maybe some lettuce at the start of the year. Something that I can easily clear out in time to get these roots planted. I may therefore sow direct this time, station sow. I'll have to see how that goes. But I think I will also put these a little bit closer together because I don't need the really big sized roots. Ignoring the disaster that went on below where they'd all forked, the diameter at the top of those roots was enormous, and it doesn't really want to be quite that big. So I will pack them in a little bit closer. The plants hopefully then won't get quite so big, and away we go. So see what happens next year. Hopefully I do a little bit better than this. But I do like the witloof chicory, and it's a very interesting thing to grow. So that is, I think, the last video of 2021. So I wish you all a happy new year, and I will see you when the new season begins in 2022. Thanks ever so much for watching, and bye for now.